I'd like to also thank Larry for inviting me here in the first place. And it's wonderful. It's our joy meeting you all. You're just such a good, holistic, happy, joyful bunch of people, and I really am having a good time here. Thank you. Couple of things. Whoops. I don't like standing at podiums. I like to move. So move I shall. There we go. A couple of things are, this is normally part of a 2-day course, and as Brian Brayling can tell you, who took my 2-day workshop, it's a very busy 2 days, so I'm trying to shrink that down into 90 minutes. So I can't show you all the research. I can show you the more significant studies, about half perhaps, and hopefully when I'm zipping through everything, it'll make sense. But I may be talking, at 450, 475 words a minute with gusts up to 695. Hopefully not. I work mostly in the psychology sector, and I mostly do my lecturing and such with biofeedback and neurofeedback practitioners at some fairly large conferences in the United States. And I do brain mapping. That's one of the things I do. I find brain mapping, which is EEGs, full head EEGs. You can tell an awful lot about a person. In fact, you can tell so much. They're building EEGs now, or doing analysis on brain waves that are so accurate, they can fill out an MMPI questionnaire from your brain map, and it'll pretty much identically match the one you'll fill out yourself. That's how much they can tell from brain maps and stuff nowadays. It's getting amazing. Anyway, I'm going to show you a little bit here about a brain mapping in memory of Francis. This is what we do when we do our brain mapping. We put this fancy electrode set on a person's head. And this she's getting entrained while we're recording her EEG, so we can see what the flashing lights are doing to her brain waves. And this is an example of not her, but someone else. This lady here is very, very tired. And while we were actually mapping her, she fell asleep for about 3 seconds and then woke up again. And you can see this is beta activity here. It's getting slow, and then suddenly it makes an alpha burst. She falls straight into delta. Her head fell over, had a little snooze, and when her head started to fall over, it woke her up. Kind of woke her up into theta, and then she was awake again. Anyway, you can see some pretty interesting things with brain maps. This is me. How many of you struggle with insomnia? Yeah, not necessarily sleep onset, but you wake up at 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and you can't get back to sleep. I did that for many, many winters, and to some degree often struggled. Then one year, I always went to the sun tanning booth. Now, of course, you've got to be careful which sun tanning booths you go to. But I went to one that the bulbs had good UVA, UVB ratios. They were low pressure sodium, and they changed their bulbs regularly, and I kind of trusted them. I used to go every winter because I felt better. And then one year my minutes ran out, so I just didn't go. That year I fell to pieces. I had spasms all through my body that were so severe I could hardly breathe at times. My left leg gave out, and I'm normally quite athletic, and I couldn't walk I was just in the kitchen, and I fell over on the floor. My molars ached. I was swollen, it seemed, swollen joints and everything. I couldn't think, and I was up every morning at 4 a.m., and I was just a train wreck. And I discovered that I was developing dementia. And dementia is highly correlated with vitamin D deficiency, believe it or not. And also, vitamin D liberates serotonin in the brain, which is why vitamin D helps you sleep. So, I brain mapped myself in April when I went downtown to visit a friend for lunch at a restaurant I'd been to half a dozen times, and I got completely lost. And that's that's not a good sign. And when I brain mapped myself, the biggest thing I saw is I had massive amounts of alpha in my prefrontal lobes and my frontal lobes. I mean, that's where attention and focus and reasoning and making executive decisions arise. That's where ADHD kids have problems with, and that's also on your way to dementia. So I had discovered it was a vitamin D connection. So I tanned for 2 weeks. We had nice warm weather in May, and I went home every lunch hour, stripped down to my shorts, and I tanned for 2 weeks. And that was my brain here. All that alpha went away. Ignore this stuff here. This is delta. This is mostly artifact because I was brain mapping myself, so head movements show up in delta. and things. So, but this is the alpha here, clearing up a great deal. It still wasn't the best, but it's a lot better nowadays.
What did the first one show?
Oh, these pink spots, that's my whole cognition starting to shut down. Pardon? Frontal lobes, yeah, frontal and prefrontal. These are your prefrontal lobes here. Actually, depression is tied to that when you have that, though I wasn't feeling particularly depressed, but there's a form of depression tied to that. Reasoning, speech, that kind of a thing, and attention and making decisions, all in there. So, yeah.
How long did you stay in the sun?
Pardon?
How long did you stay in the sun?
Well, I went home every day for 2 weeks for an hour. The other thing is, I felt like a 100-year-old man, maybe even older. I felt ancient, and I was just trying to stay alive day by day when I was deficient. Once I was 2 weeks in the sun, and I was jumping around and full of energy and running again and mentally sharp. What a difference. And I have I have hundreds and hundreds of people now who I've treated with vitamin D. Downside to vitamin D, a lot of that stuff is fake because there's no regulations on vitamins. So I found every single vitamin D that was a pill or a powder did not work. It's synthetic. The only two brands really that I found that really work well are lanolin-based liquid. And D-drop is one, and if you get it in 1,000 IU per drop. And also Pure Encapsulations makes an excellent brand. Carlson's seems to work pretty good too, and that's a fish oil-based vitamin D. But yes, we've tried 12 different types of vitamin D, well, 13 now, I guess, and 10 of them don't work.
So what's the one, can you repeat what's the one before?
Pure Encapsulations is an excellent brand out of Ohio. Pure Encapsulations out of Ohio, and D-drop. And there's D-drop made right here in Quebec, and that's a really good brand. D-drop, D-drop. Anyway, if it wasn't for the vitamin D, I would not be here today. I would be dead probably. Carlson's makes one as well. Yeah, if you get the lower concentrations, the higher ones don't seem to work. But get the 1,000 IU to 2,000 IU per capsule, but don't get the 5s. Another thing too, if you take too much vitamin D, you will have insomnia, but for different reasons. The brain is loaded with vitamin D receptors, so we need vitamin D to calm the brain down. That's a calming effect, and vitamin D increases serotonin. But if you take too much, you start to flood your bloodstream with calcium, which throws your calcium-magnesium ratio off, and if your magnesium ratio is low to calcium, you will have insomnia. I learned that the hard way by overdosing on vitamin D. But boy, did I sleep well until the incident, until the moment happened. I was sleeping like a baby 8 hours a night, never been better. Then after 8 weeks, I was taking 20,000 IU a day. At the end of the 8th week, bing, I was up at 1. That was it, done. And then I discovered the ratio thing. So then I just quit taking it for a while, and I took some magnesium supplements, and within 4 or 5 days, I was sleeping normally again. But anyway, rule of thumb, there's so many theories out there of what you should take. Vitamin D is fat soluble. It's that important. That it's fat soluble, so we can store it up for the winter. Also, but fat does not metabolize vitamin D. So you need to base it roughly on about 2,500 IU per 100 pounds of slim weight. So I have to think back. When I was in grade 11, how skinny was I back then? So the average woman, about 3,000. The average male, about 4,000 IU per day. And the average child, 1,000, and teens, about 2,000. Also, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. It seemed important at the time. Did I mention that vitamin D improves mental cognition? I got to switch brands, don't I? Yeah. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Okay, yeah, it takes some always at night too. Split it in half because it releases serotonin and it will help you to sleep. It's been one of the best sleeping pills I've ever had. So anyway, that's the little thing about vitamin D in memory of Francis. Yes? If they're short.
Okay, vitamin D is a hormone and 90% is produced in the skin.
Yeah.
I know. So what light would you use from your experience to stimulate the production of vitamin D naturally as opposed to ingesting?
Oh, I run around almost naked in the sun. That's what I do. I like to keep brown, but when I do tan, I look for the proper. You want to go with me? Okie dokie. Yeah, it's clear out there. We could do this. You can't tan. In Canada, you cannot tan on the winter side of the equinox because you need at least a UV index of 3 to make any tanning at all. Sunscreen, even a protection factor of 4 blocks almost 98% of all vitamin D production, and an 8 blocks over 99.9. And sunscreen is causing a great deal of illness because people are so deficient in vitamin D. And the drug companies know this. It has nothing to do with skin cancer at all when it was invented. And I've got some good evidence on that.
So what's the proportion of A to B in your tanning?
You should have about 80% or so A and 20% B. That's what the atmosphere filters. And it's funny, they say don't go in the sun between 10 to 2. But if you go outside of that, you even get less A and less vitamin or UVA. Let me repeat this a bit. UVB is what causes sunburns, but it also boosts the immune system and prevents cancer. Vitamin D naturally prevents all forms of cancer by 78%. So if you ever just took vitamin D, whether it was sunshine or oral, we would have a quarter of the cancer we currently have in this world. Also, UVA prevents melanomas. And melanomas are the real nasty skin cancers that metastasize and usually kill you pretty quickly. Carcinomas are pretty easygoing. You can just pick them off with a scalpel. UVB causes carcinomas. UVA causes melanomas. For 50 years, we had sunscreens that blocked only B, and all the A went through. So because you're not burning, you're in the sun 3 times longer than normal or more. And because you're not making any vitamin D, you're not protecting yourself from melanomas. And therefore, melanomas went way up in people who use sunscreen. But when they did their studies, they only looked at carcinoma because they didn't want you to know about the melanomas. And they say, see, if you use sunscreen, it prevents carcinomas. It reduces them. Never told you about the melanomas. Interesting, hey? Anyway, I have to move on now into what I'm here for. Entrainment. Entrainment was discovered, the concept of driving brainwaves with photic stim was discovered in 1934 by Adrian and Matthews. And throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s, there were hundreds and hundreds of studies done, flashing lights in people's eyes and watching what their brain waves did and this and that. But nobody looked at them subjectively. You know, what did it do to your emotion? How did you feel? W. Gray Walters started looking at this in the 50s, and he looked at thousands of people and recorded how you felt at different frequencies: alert, mellow, this, that, whatever, dreamy, dissociated. But there was a guy named William Kroger who was interesting, and he worked in the US military. He was a physician, and it was his job to find out how come on a battleship they drove straight into enemy territory, missiles and torpedoes are flying at them, and they missed it. But because the radar guy was in a trance. The old-fashioned radar is that would go blip, 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 and the guy's just watching the enemy come on screen. That's cool. Yeah, he had completely dazed out. So William Kroger recognized the value of this dissociative effect. So he teamed up with Sidney Schneider out of Ohio back in the mid-50s, and in 1958 they came up with the Brain Wave Synchronizer. I happen to have one. I bought it on eBay as a quack psychology device. We got on board in 1985, kind of 84. I was working at the university at the time developing 10 stimulators and biofeedback gear, as Larry had said, for TMJ work. And then an instructor in performing arts had heard of this flashing light technique, and he said, can you build a machine that flashes lights at alpha waves, because I can hear that I can use it to help my performing arts students overcome stage fright. I had not heard of this, and believe me, it sounded like quackery right out of some new age science fiction book. Anyway, he didn't really know what he wanted, so I started working on this in November '84 and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and finally finished it in June '85. And I made $1 an hour, so it was a little bit painful, especially being young and having a new house and all that stuff and a big mortgage. Anyway. I was not happy that I wanted him to pay me some more money. And he wasn't willing to. He didn't have any, he said, but he said he would name it in such a way that I'd feel honored. And I wanted to call it NeuroStim, NeuroSync, something with a brainy name. And he says, a few days later, he comes back and says, we're going to call it the David. I went, oh boy, gee, I don't feel that honored. Can you give me some money? And he said, no, digital audio-visual integration device. We're integrating brainwave activity with digital audio-visual stimulation. I thought, well, he put some thought into it, and he's not going to pay me anyway, so I guess what the heck, we'll put the name on there. We made 100 panels, because when you go to a silk screener, I think it was $1,500 for one panel, and it was $1,700 for 100 panels. So we said, well, let's make the 100, which was good, because I ruined the first 5 trying to get them on. And I would have been $1,500 a pop at that point. So anyway, and then the David name started catching on. Omni Magazine did an article, a few other papers did articles, had a little TV coverage, so we thought we better just keep the David name. It was pretty friendly sounding, didn't seem to hurt anybody. Everybody kept phoning for David, though. Hey, David. And so I changed my name to Dave. And now most people call and don't have any idea. And I'm like, whew, that's good. So anyway, we've made all kinds of audiovisual stimulators over the years. This was the David one here, the original. David Plus, David Paradise XL, PALS. We have the Delights out now, which are our latest models. We had a little one built all into a set of headphones, and we're working on right now a USB-driven system that'll do 4,000 colors. And you'll be able to just maybe even Bluetooth it someday so you can run it wireless. That's what we're working on. Anyway, entrainment all works on the thalamus. This is the whole trick to everything to do with audiovisual entrainment. All of our senses except for smell route through the thalamus. And this is an example of auditory entrainment. You have maybe, it runs up through your ear, through the cochlea, into all the various bodies, through the medial geniculate, and starts to activate the thalamus. Well, there's something interesting about that whole thalamus thing. Here's a tone here, which I'll tell you in a moment. Here's a tone, bum, and when on the onset of the tone, you see this nice big pulse kicked off into the brain. So that's auditory entrainment for you. This is the world's biggest visual stimulator, and they're very expensive, and you cannot put them in a pocket unless you roll them up tight. Have you heard of highway hypnosis? Yeah, in Alberta, we have a lot of problems with that because we have such long, straight highways. And those lines go by. I've checked this now in Europe, Canada, and the United States, and pretty much at 60 miles an hour or 100 kilometers an hour, these lines do go by at about 6 lines a second. And can pull you into a theta state. And you either have a dream, maybe you'll see a pink elephant, or you might see something really scary like your mother-in-law. That'll wake you up just like that. Or maybe you'll fall asleep and drive into the ditch. But highway hypnosis is caused by entrainment off the roads. We pack it down to a little box, and we flash lights in the eyes. Now here's the thalamus, thalamuses, which we'll call thalami. There's 2 of them, and here's the lateral geniculate, which all our optic information goes down into, hits the thalami and then the cortex. Our entire cortex is wired into the thalami. And this is cool, because you guys know about an alpha rhythm? That's when you close your eyes or you're meditating, you make a lot of alpha. ADD kids make a lot of alpha. Meditators make a lot of alpha. But the alpha wave is caused by a little loop between the neurons in your cortex and the thalamus. And when you close your eyes or you meditate and you have nothing to do, instead of communicating in their little circuits in the cortex, the neuron goes, it reroutes itself and it goes down to the thalamus and goes, hey, how you doing? Yeah, I'm okay. How are you doing? Well, I'm okay. Yeah. How are you doing? Yeah, I'm okay. How are you doing? And they just do this over and over and over. And it's about a 2-inch span between the cortex and the thalamus. And that little loop takes about 100 milliseconds, which is how much hertz? How many hertz is a 100 millisecond repeating cycle? 10. 10 hertz. If something occurs every 100 milliseconds, it's 10 hertz. Guess what the frequency of our alpha rhythm is? 10 hertz. So we want to disrupt that rhythm when we do entrainment. And that's what Adrian and Matthews discovered in 1934. And here's an example of that. This is Kinney's research. This x-axis here is 1 second across. And if I just take her back one bit, we see from the onset of the actual flash, there's a 100 millisecond delay before the brain actually shows its response. 100 milliseconds. So here's a flash. This is at 2 hertz, so 2 flashes a second. Here's a flash. Here's your response. At the half-second mark, about here is another flash, and here's your response. Those are visually evoked potentials. They don't mean too much from a subjective experience. But now that we're at 4, flash, response, flash, response, flash, response, flash, response. And we see we're setting up a rhythm in there. And entrainment starts really to kind of occur at 4 hertz. This would have been cleaner if they hadn't used a strobe light. If they'd used a sine wave, that you would have had those little ripples taken out. But here's at 8, here's at 12. Actually got very pure at 12, which is usually surprisingly clean. Here's at 20. So we can drive the brain waves very easily with flashing lights. Pulsing tones do it as well. Here's what we call focus mode, and everything on, everything off, everything on, everything off, and it has maximum drive. Now this is, you can drive, of course, with different types of waveforms. You can have a square wave or a sine wave. This is what's called a modified sine wave. It's a little bit squarish, but it's roundish as well, and that generates a second harmonic in the brain, which we use at frequencies generally above 11 hertz because for cognitive stuff. For frequencies in the alpha theta range, which are for basically meditating or relaxing a person, you never want to use a square wave because it generates odd harmonics. So if you stimulate someone at 10, you can make a big 30 hertz harmonic in the brain and trigger an anxiety reaction, even though you're trying to stop an anxiety reaction. So we use sine waves for everything that's 11 hertz pretty much and under for meditative work. And for cognitive work, we use this modified waveform. Now here's an EEG here off of our system. And 1 to 4 hertz is your delta. That's your sleep stuff. 5 to 7 is your kind of dreamy, hypnagogic section. Alpha is from basically 8 to 12. Some people say 8 to 13. You get into your sensory motor rhythm or your low beta, 13. This is relaxed attention, 13, 14, 15. More active attention, up to about 20. And then you start getting into anxiety because you're getting over attentive. If your brainwave is getting dominant above 20, you're getting pretty edgy. So we're stimulating, in this case, at 7.8 hertz, which is pretty close to 8. And this is the distribution, all in key areas of the brain: frontal, central, parietal. This is your somatosensory cortex, which takes all your sensory information and composes it into a one composite picture, and then forwards it to your frontal lobes for processing. So everything you see, or you see, you touch, maybe smell, not smell because that's amygdala, but see, touch, hear, taste is routed up for processing. And prefrontal is also very, very strong here too, and that's attention. This is attention, executive decisions, being able to reason. And people who have trouble in this area don't reason well, or they have OCD. OCD definitely shows up here if you have issues, and all that kind of related. Now that waveform, because I said it was not a true sine wave, here's its harmonic here at 16, showing up on the brain map. So we can do some pretty interesting things with this. A sine wave would produce just a straight single band if we had a sine wave. Another little study done at 18.5 hertz. I don't quite know why they used 18.5, but they did. And on the CZ, which is right on the top of your head, that's the center of your motor strip. And they found that photic entrainment, PE, at 18.5 increased EEG by almost 50%. That's massive. I mean, it's easy for alpha waves to go up and down a 2 or 3 to 1 ratio, but beta waves, you can barely push them 20%, generally speaking. Auditory pulses alone at 18.5 increased it by about 21%. Eyes open, again, auditory entrainment about 27. So lights certainly have a bigger impact than the sounds do. But nonetheless, you can sure drive brain waves, and that's a substantial change. By the way, this is pulse tones. This is not hemisync or binaural beats or holosync. The bulk of the research, especially the EEG stuff, show that the hemisync, binaural beats, that barely work at all. So we do have them as an option on our gear because of marketing pressure, but I generally don't advise anybody to use them. Unless maybe you want to block out background noise. And the reason why they don't work is to entrain, you have to use the thalamus. Binaural beats are just two steady tones. There is no beat. The beat is a perception that happens in our head, in our brain, for localizing sources of sound. When there's phase differences, we actually analyze the process the phase differences, and we get this perception of a beat, but it's not a real beat. And it doesn't drive brainwaves. It's very, very insignificant. So entrainment, a couple things. We get all these pulses going on, and they increase neurotransmitters in the brain, which is very interesting and a nice surprise. So what happens to us? We go through a stress response. Nothing like laughing a little, hey? Super. Oh, there we go. So when we go into stress, the first thing that happens, all you have to do is have a thought of something stressful. How many of you have thought about global warming? And you get stressed out, your hands suddenly get cold, or you get edgy, or you're snapping at your mate now because you're in a flight or fight response. How about oil issues or energy? How about pollution? All these things, yeah, that can put us into a stress response. It doesn't have to be real. In terms of someone actually threatening you for your life right now. It can just be a thought about it. How many of you have watched a scary movie that isn't real at all, and you're just like this? Yeah, I get like that terribly. So as soon as we feel anxious for whatever reason, getting up in front of and doing a lecture, yeah, that can do it. My fingers are always cold the first 20 minutes until I kind of get into the group. Serotonin crashes. That's the first thing, and that's your feel-good kind of neurotransmitter. Beer increases it, ecstasy increases it, cocaine does, shopping, romance, all kinds of things increase serotonin, and it's a feel-good, nice and relaxed. Vitamin D increases it. It crashes right quick, and norepinephrine, which is basically adrenaline for the brain, jumps way up, right? And it prepares us for battle. So we get cold hands, so we don't bleed if we're cut. We get heart starts to go. We start burning off fat. We start converting fat to fatty acids, so we can have energy, and so on. And we get a racy head because our alpha shuts down and our beta goes up, and we're really, really alert. How many of you have been in your house at night and you heard a little funny sound? And then all of a sudden you hear every funny sound. The refrigerator, the furnace, the this. The house creaking because it's getting cooler. All that stuff. And you get caught up in this little cycle. And if you get caught up in that a lot, your GABA starts to shut down. And GABA is very important for making us feel calm. And all kinds of nasty things happen. Things happen to our hippocampus particularly, where brain-derived neurotrophic factor gets shut down, so people who have stress can't remember things. That ever happened to anybody here? So a few things below serotonin. 70% of the clinical population has issues with serotonin depletion problems. It's involved in depression, anxiety, and panic, PMS, eating disorders, insomnia, obsessive-compulsive, migraine, addictions, and insulin issues. It's also, and this is norepinephrine. Norepinephrine is made in basically the pons of the brainstem. It goes all over the place too. It's quiet during feeding, rest, and grooming in primates. Except for those of you who groom each other. It's very calming to be groomed. I don't know anything about that. It activates rapidly during stress or perception of a threat. Read an article in the newspaper, bang, up it goes. Play a video game, bang, up it goes. Especially if it's a tough video game, and it activates on an as-needed basis. If you can't keep up with the stress, it crashes, and then you go into helplessness and hopelessness. And that's where depression starts to happen. The outward directed aggression becomes inward, and that's where people who are low in serotonin and norepinephrine are typically suicidal. So they're no longer protecting themselves from their environment. They're just sort of going to kill, or not going to kill the threat in their environment. They start to kill themselves. Increases startle response, and it's also high in the urine of those with post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay, So an inverse relationship, so serotonin goes low, norepinephrine jumps way up, and sometimes dopamine will go up too. And if dopamine is overexpressed when serotonin is low, it can result in delusional thinking. You see that more in people who have cocaine addictions, where they've depleted their serotonin and all this dopamine's flying around. They have all these delusional thoughts that they're royalty or that there's ghosts in their basement or things like this. Now, we're going back to the same guy who just went through some stress. He read the paper and there was something terrible in there about global warming. I've got newspaper clippings that'll just make you shake your head, but we don't have time for that. Looking at the alpha again, on a brain map, the left side of your brain is your happy side. It governs approach behavior. The dopamine is generated on the left side. It's the excitement. Woohoo, let's go party, or let's have romance, let's go shopping. Look, a puppy, things like this. The right side is your fear center, basically. And it is the one that, if it's activated, the glass is half empty, my life is lousy, I don't make enough money, my spouse is never there for me, my friends couldn't care less, blah, 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 and on it goes. Life sucks, basically. And if that's activated. Now, in this case, this is a happy person here. And we can see here that there is more alpha, this greenish area, on the right-hand side than there is on the left. Well, alpha is an idling rhythm. When you're making alpha, there's nothing going on, or not much going on. That's why meditators make it, and it's restorative. So this would mean that if there's less alpha on the left, that they're engaged more on the left, and therefore they're happy. There we go. And everything else here is relatively normal. 0 standard deviations happen to be here. I should mention this is a normative database. They plug it. There's about, 400 people in this database who are supposedly normal, whatever that really means. And this is showing variations from the norm. Now, as soon as that person has an anxiety reaction, they go from happy to not so happy. They get really, really alert and edgy. And the alpha shuts down, and all this beta starts to activate in the frontal lobes. And they are very, very on edge. I'm probably sort of in a half state there at the moment because I'm pretty on the ball right now. I'll have a beer and I'll reverse all that later. And you get really racy-headed. How many of you have ever been driving in traffic and maybe you're a little confused about where you're driving and maybe you drift over in your lane a little bit or this or that and someone flips you the bird? Ever happened? Or you hear someone shake their fist at you and then you race on it and you think about, what an ass, gee, he should be nicer. And it goes around your head for like the next 8 hours. Ever happened? Yeah, no. Yeah, that's it. That's that low alpha, high beta state. And so you'll relive the original sort of trauma 1,000 times over. That's, wow. I mean, the original event was enough, but now we got to do it 1,000 times over. Or you watch, an event on the news. Something terrible happens in the news, like when the Twin Towers came down. How many times did they show that? Yeah, 500 times over the next 6 months. I'm sure it was probably sponsored by Pfizer, who makes Prozac. And keep playing it, man. We're selling more pills. Well, if we can relax and stop that racy head, we can reduce 90% of our stress. Well, meditation is a great way to do that, but so many people struggle trying to meditate. And once you get racy-headed, as those of you who meditate know, it can take a while to get back into it. It may take you an hour to get your head clear enough to get back into trance and dissociate from the sympathetic thoughts that are destroying your body with cortisol and norepinephrine and so on. We can see all the good benefits of meditation, right? Plus you look younger if you meditate. I use entrainment for my meditation because it is so fast, and I'm 83. Okay, maybe a few years younger, but I just turned 55 on October 1st, so if anyone wants to buy me a beer later, we're good. Okay, if you're a really good meditator, you can do this kind of thing, and it makes airline seats more comfortable. That's why they invented it. But here's something you don't know. The Irish actually invented meditation. And when the English were sailing around the world way back in the 1600s and 1500s, they would take Irish clerics with them. They went to Tibet, taught them how to meditate. They went to India, taught them how to meditate. And the Irish do it this way. Now, if someone could please point out the professional and the beginner. He's got some learning to do, doesn't he? Okay, we'll move on. No racy head in that group, okay? None. Maybe a headache, but no race. Okay, so dissociation is important to keep yourself grounded and stable when stuff happens that you don't want or plan for. And entrainment does it extremely well. Clears up all that chatter. This is the Kroger and Schneider study of the Brain Wave Synchronizer, and they found that roughly in 5 minutes, 78% of everybody was in a hypnotic trance. That's just lights only, and that's a dissociated state. The other slide was better, wasn't it? I like that slide. It's just so good. We did a little study at the U of T in Austin, and they found that entrainment for high dissociators and low dissociators was better than standard psychology techniques as dot staring and stimulus deprivation, like float tanks and things. And I have more studies which I don't have a chance to even time to show you. They were using it way back in '66 for dental work, and they would actually I actually have a picture of this in an actual scientific journal with the big brainwave synchronizer sitting on the little dental tray, and the dentist is all glazed out, and the patient's all glazed out, and who knows what tooth he's actually filling. Because this light is flashing all over the room. But it calms down the hypothalamus is the little part of our brain, it's just below the thalamus, hence the hypo part, that regulates all of our body arousals, if you want to call it, in relation to our emotion. We're feeling a little romantic. Certain things happen in our body that the hypothalamus regulates. You feel a little scared. You get sweaty fingers. You get tense muscles. You get cold hands, things like this. You feel really relaxed. You get warm hands, dry fingers, relaxed muscles, and so on. And so if we can block the signals from the cortex saying, be scared, be scared, be scared, and block it, then the whole body will relax. There's the hypothalamus right there. And look at this. This is hand temperature of someone who's rather stressed out. How many of you have ever noticed after you get stressed, you have really cold fingers? This guy's at 75 Fahrenheit. That's cold. He's a golfer, believe it or not, who's probably struggling with his game. They put him on entrainment at 10 hertz, and there's about a 6-minute time. Remember that hypnosis study, 6 minutes, to really dissociate? And as he starts to hit the 6-minute mark, his hands start to really warm up. He's basically in a deep meditative trance at this point, and having the associated warm hands with it. Look at this for tension in the forearm. EMG, electromyograph. Look how fast at about the 6-minute mark his arm relaxes. That's pretty cool. Look at this. Man, it got so quiet in here. Must be serious. Skin conductance, or how sweaty are we? Again, at about the 6-minute mark, your hands get nice and dry. These are all signs of being in a deep meditation. Difference is it's not taking 10 years of practice to get there. It's happening in 6 minutes, 6 to 10 minutes, super fast. Okay, yeah, oh, sorry, I thought you were going to ask a question. It didn't work in the sweat lodge. No, you probably got sweaty in the sweat lodge. But if you go to come to Edmonton, I'll put you in an unsweat lodge. We'll just sit you on a lake at -30. You won't be sweating. You won't be sweating. You might be praying, but you won't be sweating. Especially when we take off and leave you behind and you don't know where you are. In a swimsuit. In a baseball cap. Yeah. So if we can find ways to dissociate out of fears or events as soon as they happen, instead of stacking up all this stress and at home, and then at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, we come home and the wife says, how was your day? Just shut up those damn kids. I'm having a beer. I'm watching TV. Don't bother me. Right? This guy says, hey, darling, my day was rather crappy, but I love you, and how are my kids doing, you know? And so where would you like to be? The warrior or the peacemaker, especially when you're driving? Okay, so if you go around the circle, and then you go around the circle, and you go around it again, and you slowly exhaust your you exhaust your adrenals, you exhaust your norepinephrine that's generated, exhaust your dopamine, you exhaust your left frontal lobes. Left frontal lobes get tired out before the right ones do, unfortunately. It's just the way they're made. You start craving carbs. And stressed as dessert spelled backwards. Isn't that clever? Because we're trying to spike the brain up with glucose to make it feel a little more alive. And anything that spikes insulin, such as icing, causes a serotonin release in the brain. So when I was deficient in vitamin D and my brain was going through its sort of trauma, I was eating chocolate bars like there were no tomorrow. How many of you like eating chocolate bars under stress? Few people do, yeah. They're great. And we get needy. Sometimes I look like that in the morning. It's really not so bad. That's what Listerine is for, right? As our stress gets a hold of us, and whether it's from, say, nutritional problems or life problems, and our dopamine and serotonin crash, we start developing addictive behaviors like those, and we get fanatical about it. How many of you guys ever been a compulsive shopper? Yeah. Yeah, or started drinking or gambling or eating junk food. All kinds of people get locked into dopamine-producing behaviors when their lives are not going well, and these are a lot of them. So, depression, dopamine depletion, norepinephrine depletion, serotonin depletion, hippocampal shrinkage. So we don't remember things very well when the hippocampus shrinks because it gets beat up by cortisol. So let's try and balance our arousal a little. Well, how anxious would you get during a dental procedure? And what part of the procedure do you think would be the most scary part? That really makes people anxious. Really? The needle. Laying back in a chair with 107 beats per minute is a little fast for a heart to be going. If you dissociate with 10 hertz flashing lights, it drops it down to 93. If they play just a Walkman of relaxing music, it goes down to 85. That's pretty cool. That's power dissociation. This is a little study that was done on TMJ. And you people know about TMJ, temporomandibular joint? That's highly tied to stress, I found out. In Alberta, we had most of our TMJ problems. Temporomandibular joint, where your joint clicks and there's pain and usually headaches and stuff associated with it. We had a lot of our TMJ problems in the 80s when oil was $15 a barrel. And the reason why is because Alberta's a giant oil producer. And when it was $15 a barrel, a lot of guys are getting laid off. And I ran a study on 500 women, and the first thing that triggered TMJ symptoms was an increase in arguments with their spouse caused by economic uncertainty. Once oil jumped to $30 a barrel, there were hardly any people to be found anymore with TMJ problems. So you can look at this though, bruxing, that's grinding your teeth. Emotional tension, muscle fatigue, insomnia, dizziness, headache, TMJ pain, masticatory muscle pain, that's your jaw closing muscles, pain in your masseters and temporalis. Neck muscle pain, hearing issues, pain and clicking and blah, 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 blah. Look at this, pre-treatment, 100, 100, 93, 70s, 80s, all the way down. After, I think this was 1 month, pretty much 0 people had TMJ symptoms anymore. These are people less than 1 year of symptoms. These are people more than a year of symptoms. Certainly worked better on the people who had less than a year, but nonetheless, big, big reductions just by blinking lights. Okay, now there's low arousal. Usually we get really anxious and wound up and our arousal is really high, our alpha's low, our beta's flying. But as we exhaust ourselves, or if we say have nutritional problems or other things, or genetic issues such as in some forms of ADD and ADHD, our brain goes slow. So now I'm talking about how we're using the light and sound to slow down a fast brain. Now I'm going to talk about how we can speed up a slow brain. So ADD, dementia, depression. One type of anxiety is a high alpha type. It's what we call a no brakes anxiety. Some forms of anxiety are too much gas, but this is a no brakes. You don't have a whole lot of gas going on, but if you have no brakes, guess what? You're still smashing into the curbs and other cars and garbage cans, if you were a car, that is, and you still do damage. And so there's a high alpha type of anxiety that can be very confused often with the low alpha type of anxiety. Seasonal affective disorder, fibromyalgia, hypothyroidism, and nutritional and adrenal issues. Well, this is something that's really interesting. Remember depression, low serotonin, low norepinephrine, and so on. This shows 30 minutes again at 10 hertz. And look at serotonin jumps 23%. That's huge. Norepinephrine jumps 18%. Endorphins jump 13%. And daytime levels of melatonin, which is tied to SAD, this is a winter study, go down. So you're more awake and more alert and feeling better and less moody. So this is really, really good. And when we do work with depression people, this is one of the reasons why we can clear depression so quickly with entrainment. But there's more. Stress causes a reduction in cerebral blood flow, which doesn't help either. Entrainment boosts cerebral blood flow. In this case, Fox and Rakely found that the peak of cerebral blood flow occurs at 7.8 hertz. Isn't that interesting? It's the Schumann resonance. So it's probable that humans have learned to take advantage of that resonance over the millennia and use it to our advantage. And when we're in buildings full of metal joists and rebar and all this kind of stuff, it's possible that we're developing some psychiatric issues because there's too much metal around us and we're no longer getting the rhythm. Possible. I'm just saying. Now look at this. This is a person with ADD, and she's a college student, and she seems to have fibromyalgia as well. You cannot learn if this is your dominant brainwave, and it's frontal, especially at 7 and 8 hertz, you cannot learn. She can read 2 paragraphs, and then she's fogged. And she's trying to be a graduate from university. She can't graduate from university with that. We should be at least here at 10. That's the norm. But as you get to about 8.5, you become special needs. And you're completely cognitively impaired. That's dementia. And there's possibly, a vitamin D tied to her too, vitamin D issue tied to her as well, because she never went outside at all, was very sick and so on. This is over 3 standard deviations off the norm, which is quite significant. So because entrainment increases cerebral blood flow, I thought, instead of giving her what I think would eliminate that, which usually would be 14 to 16 hertz stimulation, I just gave her what she exactly shouldn't have. And I thought, wonder if the blood flow will clear that up, because this is a hypoperfused state of cerebral blood flow. All kinds of functional MRI studies have confirmed this, and PET scans, that if you're making massive amounts of basically sort of slow alpha theta, or thalpha, some people call it, your brain is not running. It's very shut off. Look at this. That's 45 minutes later. Normalized it. Now she read 5 pages instead of 2 paragraphs before she fogged. That's pretty cool. One of the things we didn't know last time I lectured at the Syntonics conference is that entrainment inhibits the half frequency of stimulation. And this is so vital because depression is high left alpha. This lady with ADD and is high slowed alpha. Fibromyalgia is high slowed alpha. ADHD is high theta. All brains that are stuck going so slow and you can't pay attention, you can't reason, you're impulsive. Your brain is in a no brakes condition, but really no gas either, but no brakes. And you have all these issues going on with your life. So we discovered about, a couple years after the last Tonics conference that entrainment inhibits the half frequency of stimulation. And this is a boy with ADHD, so he's hyperactive ADD, and he's making huge amounts of theta, huge amounts. And so what we did is he was given 14 hertz stimulation because he's making high at 7. These massive amounts of 7 hertz, slow, say this theta stuff, and give him 14. And at the 30-minute mark, it was turned on, and suddenly his brain jumps down, inhibits. Then the brain fights back and pushes itself back up into the ADHD, and then it loses and it crashes down again. And it stays there. And so you can successfully treat these slow brainwave disorders in minutes, not just hours or days or weeks, in minutes. It's very fast. Yes, there is a building effect, and I'll show you a slide on that you'll find interesting. There is a building effect. Now here's depression. Now this is the editor that we use because all our gear is programmable. And you can put anything you want in it yourself. You can custom design your own. You just have to get the software, which is $70, I think, put it on your computer and program it off your computer. You can even program it off CDs. And you can make your own relaxation CDs or guided imagery, and it'll program the machine as the CD is playing, which is kind of cool. And so what we're doing with depression, we know that the left frontal lobe shuts down. And I'll show you this in a moment on EEG. And the right frontal lobe is too active. So we have a patent on field stimulation where we can put a frequency in the left fields and a different frequency in the right fields. And so we're giving here on the right side, which is going to go to the left brain, 19 to 21 hertz to inhibit that alpha. And squeeze it down and get the left brain going. And we're going to give 10 hertz on the left side for the right brain to say, take that fear side of the brain and just keep it calm, keep it calm. Does that make sense? Okay. And so that's what we're doing. We have two different fields here for those stimulus A or frequency A, and in this case the right's, frequency B in the left's. It's going through, the thalami should be here. I didn't draw them in. And put a different frequency in each side of the brain. And this is a guy here who missed 2 years of high school because of such severe depression. And he's 8 standard deviations in the front. I mean, this guy can barely tie his shoes at this. This is alpha again. So theta, alpha. Sometimes I'm showing the actual hertzes, and sometimes I'm showing the frequency ranges for simplicity's sake. So this is your sleep stuff, your dream stuff, your sort of meditation alpha, relaxed attention, active attention, and anxiety. And 8 standard deviations is the norm with the left lean, more problems on the left side. Okay, so we gave him that depression protocol, and bingo, 45 minutes later. Now we're looking at 4.8 standard deviations on our scale. So he's probably pushing about 5 here, but he's gone way down, and he could feel it. He felt better, more lifted right away, and it wasn't long, and he went back to school after missing 2 years. This is the study here that actually is this. If it wasn't for this study, I would not be here today. I'd be doing, I don't know what I'd be doing, designing computers or something. We had all our TMJ patients, and some of them had severe debilitating pain for over 10 years. So, and there's a syndrome known as TMJ personality, because a lot of TMJers have a personality that brings on their TMJ pain. And it's a performance type of anxiety, or a type of performance anxiety. Anyway, what I did is I took 10 of our worst patients that we had at the university, and I said to them, I'm giving you a guided imagery, which has been shown in psychology circles to have a fairly profound relaxation effect. And I said, you're laying on this big, beautiful, fuzzy beach towel on a really nice, warm beach, and you look into this, on a tropical island, and you look into the sky, and the big blue sky, and it is so beautiful and warm, and the birds are flying around, and the little fish are jumping in the sea, and things like this, as you can hear the surf crashing in the background, and all this stuff. And so anyway, and all we said was, so we're going to give you this guide imagery, and when we're done, we expect you to be relaxed. Well, that expectation made them all tense. This is their left masseter muscle right on the side of their face here. All tenses up. This is finger temperature, getting colder and colder. That's not good. Had a 5-minute setup period, fired up at alpha at 10 hertz, and immediately their muscles got so relaxed. I mean, this is so extremely difficult to relax to this depth. It really is. At 1.3 microvolts, full spectrum EMG is difficult. And look what happened at about the 5-minute mark. Hands started to warm up as they drifted into a state of meditation and shut off the whole sympathetic stuff going on in their head. That's pretty cool. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here. Here's a guy with chronic pain. He had an occupational injury. A big shelf at his office fell on him and broke his back. And he had been 5 years post-injury, and he was accepted into this study because he'd attempted suicide a month before, so they didn't have any liability issues with them putting him on crazy lights and sounds, because they didn't know what those were. So they wanted to make sure everybody tried to kill themselves first, just in case there's an incident. And so we were in the good. His medication right here is 35 extra strength Tylenol with codeine a day. And his pain is still a subjective level of 9. I don't think it's working. Anxiety is still a 9. Suicide ideation is still pretty high. Put him on entrainment, and this is our old David Juniors, which don't work really nearly as well as they do now. And he started really to come down, and they said, hey, this could be a placebo effect. Let's take him off. They took him off, put him on 10s, and everything got worse. Okay, well, that's not good. Let's put him back on. They put him back on. And so he had been 5 years now post-injury. In fact, he likes machines so much, he got a little 12-volt car charger, and he started camping again, and he would plug it into his car, keep the batteries charged, and his life changed dramatically. But one of the things, his wife had run the house for the last 5 years. Well, now he's getting it together, and he wants to share running the house. Cause a little conflict, maybe? Just a little. And when that family instability happened, his anxiety went up a bit, his pain went up a bit, his medication went up a bit, but his suicide ideation kept coming down. That doesn't make any sense. Your life is getting kind of lousy, and you're feeling happier and happier about it. He was like, whew, I'm going to finally leave her. I don't have to hang around anymore. I don't know. Look, this is the quality of life monitors. You look at coping and hopefulness and self-esteem and family stability and rest and sleep. Everything is in a tank here, goes up, and then they put them on 10s, everything crashes. Put them back on the light and sound, everything starts to go up, and then the family issues start to happen here. But he keeps getting more and more hopeful. What neurotransmitter would you really think would be involved in reducing suicide tendencies and increasing hopefulness? Serotonin. Yeah, you could put this guy in the Titanic. And you go, isn't it cool that they tipped all those decks for us? We can surfboard on it now. We're not sinking. This is just a cool theme park. Maybe not quite, but. Okay, here we go. Pain. A little quick 2-month pain study on our old gear. Perceived pain was about a 50, and in 2 months they recorded it as a 29. That's pretty good improvements in pain. Depression went down on the Beck Depression Index, so depression went down as well, very significantly. This is in the wrong place. These are people with fibromyalgia, and I have more to this study, but I have to really cut it short. But basically, we let people try different things. And about 25% of the group had to be cognitive in the morning because they had to take their kids to school or they had to drive to work themselves. And they had fibrofog. You guys heard of fibrofog? That's long streams of alpha, and you just can't think, and you're just out. So this reflected about 100% of those who needed to be cognitive. But 83% of them, or 90% roughly, used alpha to reduce anxiety in the afternoon. Nobody liked theta, which was probably actually quite okay in this case, because theta is one of the signs of fibromyalgia. And almost 100% of them used delta for sleep. If you do not have fibromyalgia, you cannot use delta for sleep. We've tried. It will not work. You have to use Schumann, by and large, because their brain waves are so slow that their peak alpha is about 7 hertz compared to our 10. So our delta is their theta. So they're technically getting theta, even though it's in the delta band. That make sense? Hope so. Okay, so we had them in 3 groups, a medical, nutritional, and an entrainment group, AVE. And they had individual treatments the first month, and then they combined everything the second month. And you can see that AVE turned out to be the best treatment for anxiety, pain, fatigue, and energy, better than the meds. and better than nutrition the first month. Then when everything was combined, where they got everything, all the treatments together, entrainment really shone through on, it changed a little bit, but overall the group found that depression, pain, sleep, and fatigue, entrainment had the best effects on it compared to the other treatment modalities. And this is a little study done by Duncan Anderson on migraine. 7 subjects, 42 years of age, and we've treated hundreds and hundreds of people with migraine now. And they had a frequency dial on the device, and they had an intensity dial on the device. They didn't know what frequency they were using, but he could tell. He had a calibration chart. Well, they liked alpha frequencies, and they liked brighter intensities. How many of you guys have ever had a migraine? Anybody here? You don't like bright lights much when you have a migraine. Well, these guys liked it brighter because it's dissociating them out of the migraine. That's pretty cool. And they took the unit wherever they went, and if they felt the aura coming on, bingo, pop on the gear and dissociate out. Entrainment sessions were roughly 30 minutes, and the migraines were roughly about 6 hours on average, which reduced down to 35 minutes after they used entrainment. So very fast and effective. Okie dokie, concentration. Now we're getting to some of the stuff regarding students. This is driving the brain up. What they found is that they gave them there's 78 students in this group, by the way, and they gave them just one session. They gave them a test, a cognitive test for concentration, and also one for memory, which I'll show in a moment. And then they entrained them, and then they retested them. And the controls got to read a book or something like that for a few minutes, and then they retested them later. Well, the controls are here, and the beta SMR group, now beta, when you give someone beta SMR, that's like 20 hertz and like 14, not only are you boosting the faster brain waves in the active attention zone, but not in the anxiety zone, but you're inhibiting the half frequencies, which are 10 and 7. And you're driving up cerebral blood flow to some degree. Say 7.8 was the peak, but the whole band does increase cerebral blood flow. So the guys on entrainment did really well compared to, on the beta SMR group particularly compared to controls, and if we gave them just alpha at 10 hertz, they did pretty good too. But alpha is a little more fuzzy, it's a little more foggy when you're on alpha, like when you're doing a meditation, so it'll be a little bit more difficult to concentrate because you're more relaxed, or your arousal's down. When they looked at memory, it turned out that beta SMR was still good, and the controls actually got worse, and alpha actually was better for memory, and beta SMR was better for concentration. That's kind of interesting. What would it do for grade point average? Well, this is a study done by Tom Budzinski. And after the fall grades came in, right around December, Tom ran quickly on, in this case, he was using 15-minute sessions at 14 and 22 hertz. And he ran them on 30 sessions throughout January and then left them alone. And at the end of April, when they got their grades, the entrainment group jumped a whole 0.7 GPA, and the controls fell by 0.3. So relatively speaking, one whole GPA improvement, or 25% improvements in grades. That's huge. And that's one of the studies that show how it stays, for whoever asked that question, if there's a holding effect. So that is pretty amazing. But there's more to the story. And this one just got published last year out of Texas in Austin. And they looked at worry in students, because a lot of students worry a lot. Worry causes all kinds of stress and anxiety and sometimes suicide. And worry, what does worry do to cerebral blood flow? Takes it down, makes them ADHD-like. So they had a waiting list control, so these guys got nothing. They had expressive writing. We write about your worry. Gee, who wants to do that, right? And isn't enough just worrying about it? They had a worry exposure where they exposed you to things that cause you to worry to hopefully that they would desensitize you to the worry. And then here's the entrainment group. They were originally going to use entrainment. They were using it originally. The original write-up was they were using it as a placebo, what they call a credible placebo, but it worked so well they said, oh, we better call this a treatment condition. Because entrainment reduced worry more than all those other techniques, and they were only allowed to use it twice a week. And you could use entrainment every day if you want to. But because the expressive writing and the worry exposure took so much work on the psych students and the profs to implement those, and they had to do that in class, whereas entrainment you can take home, they were only allowed to do it twice a week, and still it performed so well. Well, if something is really easy to do, are you likely to do it more? Yeah. If I was to say to you, you got two options here. You can either eat a chocolate bar or take this nail and hammer and drive it into your toe. What are you likely to do? Yes, sir.
When I hear this, I have the feeling we don't really care. It's like short-term stabilization. This I understand. I have nothing against it. But on the other hand, it works like a little bit like a headache pill. You don't care about why somebody has anxiety, why somebody has fibromyalgia and all that. We just fix him.
You got a problem with that?
Yeah.
I don't.
Because that means we leave the world as it is, and you poor little individual who reacts actually adequately to wrong conditions, you get fixed up to work better in wrong conditions.
Not necessarily. Well, hey, but our life is full of wrong conditions, and we can't control that.
We can.
If you live in the country and on a mountaintop, maybe here, maybe get a permanent suite at the hotel. And never drive on the freeway, and never go to an airport, and never get caught up in traffic, and never work an 8-to-5 job. If you, or unless it's meditating or something, but no, there's so many things in our life that we cannot control for. And whether this stuff holds, which it does, the thing is it's not drug, it's very simple to use, and it produces homeostasis naturally. And so whether it holds and you only use it for a couple of months or whether you use it daily, does it really matter? If you're functioning well, it's good. And plus, every time we have a bad experience, our amygdala forms that memory, and we will continue to have bad experiences. So if we can have good experiences, we don't form hundreds and hundreds of bad experiences. Okay, anyway, when you look here at, is this the dropouts? No, this is the worry, sorry. Here's the dropouts here. The waiting list control, or these are people who stayed in the study, who adhered to their treatment program the best. And of course, the wait list didn't count. The expressive writing, worry exposure, and entrainment here adhered to the treatment the best. Again, if you're working with people, if they won't adhere to the treatment, then it's harder to work with them, right? Because they just drop out. Here's the dropouts here, and you can see that entrainment had the least dropouts because it's so easy to implement, and it's just relaxing. Well, as we age, our cerebral blood flow goes down and down and down, and so does our cognitive ability go down with it, including risk of falling and depression and being able to process information. Anyway, there was this student who just graduated from psychology school, and he had his first job, and his first job was in a senior's home. And he thought, okay, good, today I'm going to measure the cognition of all these old seniors and these old guys and see how they're doing. So he had the attendant bring in 3 old guys, and he said, okay, guys, let's see now, what's 3 times 7? The first guy goes, hey, hey, Sonny, that's 274. He goes, oh, boy, that's not good. Puts an X on his chart. He looks at the other fella, and he says, sir, can you tell me what 3 times 7 is? Oh, of course. Everybody knows it's Tuesday. Oh, boy. Puts a couple of X's on his chart. The third guy says, sir, help me out here. I'm hoping on you. Can you tell me what 3 times 7 is? Well, of course. It's 21. He goes, oh, good, and gives him a check mark. And then he calls in the attendant to usher these guys out, and then he remembers his professor saying to him, always ask them how they arrived at the answer. And he said, I don't know why that we'd ask that question. How do you ask a guy, how do you arrive at 21? 3 times 7 is 21. Anyway, he goes, excuse me, sir, excuse me. I know this is a really dumb question, but I have to ask you, how did you arrive at 21? Well, it's easy, Sonny. I took 274 and I subtracted it from Tuesday. So anyway, yes, they do lose their cerebral blood flow as we age, unless we really keep cognitively sharp. So, knowing that entrainment boosts cerebral blood flow, and we can also inhibit frequencies, what would happen if we gave seniors beta SMR type frequencies, and the higher alpha or SMR, that's 12 to 20 hertz kind of stuff. In this case, they used 9 to 22 hertz random, and this was done in 2 seniors' homes, and they're treating 10 at a time with a multiple system that we had. And you can see, this is on a microcog scale, attention, reasoning, memory, spatial ability, especially spatial. And this is critical because risk of falling is tied to this. And there's a lot of hip fractures and things that happen in seniors. Reaction times, processing speeds, and so on and so forth improve a fair bit. This is a study we did with that depression protocol I showed that graph of earlier. And these are the controls. These are seniors roughly going through February, March, April. And the controls all have depression on the geriatric depression scale. We gave them a placebo condition of a half hertz we didn't use a placebo in this case. We put them on for 4 weeks with the depression protocol, and immediately the entire group was non-depressed. The entire group. And typically we see 100% of people who respond. And they state, well, they went up a little bit for some reason. Could be a little intergroup variability. But also, look at the risk of falling. Now, this is the balance mean score. And you can see right here, it was moving into spring, so the control group were starting to walk a little more outside. And they improved a bit. But the entrainment group using the depression protocol actually had better improvements on balance than did the controls. And I've got some great ADD stuff to show you guys, but I don't have time to show you. Because, it's 12:40, that's not so bad. This shows some differences, though, between blue light and red light, for instance. And this is skin, electrodermal. And you can see here, very sweaty hands, because it keeps you somatically activated. Red, that's what red does, increases bodily arousal. Blue-tinted white light causes a relaxation response very quickly at about the 6-minute mark. And we've got stuff on EMG on that, too, and so on. These are some of the studies that have been done. These are actually should be pretty much all the studies that have been done on entrainment, all kinds of stuff. And I say I didn't really show you any of the ADD stuff. I could if someone wants to see that. It's very powerful for ADD, and we've had good results with autism as well. Quite a few athletes are using it nowadays, especially golfers. And sometimes they golf with these glasses on. And set it to what's called an SMR frequency, or a sensory motor rhythm frequency, at about 14 hertz. And they actually golf with it, with the glasses on. And we've had tennis players use it. We have protocols to help people actually practice their visualizations for sports and for skills and so on. But Christine Boudre, right here in Quebec, got silver after using our gear. And she gave us a really nice testimonial. The Leafs, when they were using it, had a much better win-loss ratio than when they weren't using it. They're unfortunately not using it now. And entrainment appears to relax the body and mind, yet stimulate the structure of the brain itself through neurotransmitters and cerebral blood flow, and inhibiting some of those low frequencies if you want. And there you go. Actually, I got done in record time. That's good. Thank you. Now, we have some books at the back that have a whole bunch of articles in them that I've written over the years on ADD, post-traumatic stress, seniors. If you want some, you can. There's also protocol guides back there which show you how we design the sessions.
So if you use the color to increase
I'm missing a slide here. Hang on one second. Yes, I do have to show you a little bit about color and brainwaves. If you could just bear with me just for a moment. Where'd it go? Oh, I had it hidden. Oh, no wonder. Yeah, Nancy, could you bring me up that unit there? I want to just show them the colors. This is an important slide here. Oh, yeah, super. Thank you. There have been a couple of studies done looking at color effects on EEG. And the color isn't as, its effects aren't as pronounced as actually strobing the lights. It's less significant than strobing the lights. The lights are quite powerful, as we know here. But you can enhance it. Now, I steer away from red almost entirely, but the studies that were done, and Marvin Sams and Nancy White did a study, and a few other people have, and they found that red increased beta activity in around the 15 to 20 hertz range. Orange, kind of up there too. Yellow increased, in fact, red pushed people above 20, and this is more 15 to 20. Yellow increased the relaxed attention, which is peak performance for like reading, fitness, schoolwork. Greens, improved alpha mostly. Here's a Stroop test. Anybody know what a Stroop test is? There you go. I say blue in orange letters. Blue was used in our pain studies. We found that red shot the pain up so bad. They couldn't use red at all for pain. Blue increases slower alpha, like 8 to 9 hertz, and the theta increases violet. And they did this study with people looking at lights while they were recording their EEGs on a full head mapper like I have. But then they did another study where they shone colored lights on their back without their eyes being, their eyes were just closed. And photoreceptors in their back also caused these differences in their skin. That was pretty interesting. So the clothes we wear may indeed influence how we feel. Now, a couple other little things. Remember I mentioned earlier about how when you go into a flight or fight response, serotonin crashes and norepinephrine scoots up as you prepare to fight somebody. Because when you have, however, a relationship where your norepinephrine goes up, but your serotonin goes up with it, that's what I call the Christmas brain. I mean, it could be other celebrations as well. But think about how many of you have a celebration that you really do aside from maybe Christmas or other things? And I'll use Christmas as an example. You start phoning up all your friends and relatives. Let's get together for a drink. Let's talk. I haven't seen you all year, or for 6 months or whatever. And you're all excited. You're getting presents. You're shopping. You're thinking all these good things in your mind. Maybe you're thinking about goodwill toward all men and women, as well as part of the Christmas theme. And you feel wonderful and warm inside. Anybody feel that around Christmas time? Or around their favorite holiday? Sure. And so that drives up your serotonin, and you're excited as well. And excitement drives up your norepinephrine to some degree. And engaging with people and chatting and just saying, how are you? And giving everybody big hugs drives serotonin up greatly. So this gear kind of gives you, in a sense, the Christmas brain. Now, if you go to Vegas and you look where all the gambling areas are, they have red and green in their carpets, mostly red and green. They have a little bit of yellow, a little bit of blue too, but mostly red and green, because red increases your ability to your drive to do stuff, and green makes you feel safe. So if you feel real safe but energetic, are you going to gamble more? More than likely. So anyway, just minor things about color. So we have these glasses here. We have field stimulation, and that is so that, let's say, for instance, if I was doing a beta SMR, beta on the right for the left brain and beta and SMR on the left for the right brain, then what I would typically do is on the right sides, I would select yellow, like this, and on the SMR side, probably an aqua color, or white could be fine, or this teal color. On the other hand, if I was doing depression, I would typically go to either the teal or a green or a darker blue to shut down that right frontal lobe and boost the left frontal lobe. So you can use this to enhance the photic stim. Right. Well, we'd have to check and see why. Generally, when people have sensitivities to blinking lights, if we put them on in a proper environment, put you in a nice relaxed chair or a reclined chair and give you a blanket, maybe give you a teddy bear, typically in 5 or 6 minutes, you're knocked right out and you're snoring. Or something like that. Oh, yeah, typically. Maybe you want to start with the lights dim. There is now it does increase cerebral blood flow. And so if you have a condition of hypoperfusion of cerebral blood flow, which is cognitive decline in seniors, ADD, ADHD, and depression, then you should drink a big glass of water. I'm talking about a big glass, big beer mug glass of water, wait 20 minutes or so to hydrate your body some. And it's just like a runner. If you've never run before and someone says, hey, let's go quick 5 miles or 10 kilometers, 6 miles or 10 kilometers, and especially if you haven't drank a lot, you're not going to feel good at all. You'll have a headache when you run. And this can trigger headaches in people who have hyperperfused brains, and if you don't drink a big glass of water first. It clears up in about 6 sessions, then it doesn't happen anymore. Yes?
And most people who have glaucoma, they don't know they have glaucoma. So how could this affect them? Would it affect them negatively?
No negative effects at all. No, none at all. No, we use it eyes closed typically. And it's no different than putting a flashlight into your eyes and I guess and flashing it. You know, you can get all kinds of that. But no, it's fine. We've looked at retinal detachments and we've never had any issues with anybody. Again, set the lights to a comfortable level. I've been cranking them up in here for the sake of showing it off, right? But you want to set them just to a comfortable level so they're not causing any kind of tension in your face. Because if you make them too bright, you'll start doing this. So just comfortably bright. I mean, the brighter they are, the better it works. But on the other hand, if it's too bright, it's just going to put you into an anxious state. And we won't have an alpha rhythm that we can move up or down then. Because if you're anxious, you're not making an alpha rhythm. Because your neurons are busy saying, oh my God, what's going on? I don't like this. So we have to have you relaxed and calm and so on. So I would put it on just a very comfortable setting. Some people run this, some people don't like to dissociate. It upsets them to go into that sort of, have that meditative feeling because they lose control. And so we start just with sounds only, and then we introduce the lights maybe a few weeks later on a very dim setting until they get used to it, and to that state of mind of actually just being blissful and uncontrolling. And you see the controlling a lot in these drill sergeant type, military type guys or business type guys, or people who've actually had traumas like car accidents or rape victims and military guys often who are afraid of dissociating because they don't want to lose control because bad things happen to them sometimes. So they can take a little longer to get into, but it's the best thing for them because you're getting them out of that sympathetic flight or fight response that is so destructive. Any other questions?
Thank you, David.
Thank you.